This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You are tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Over a month is gone. The NBA is in full swing. Games are being played, and the top dogs are slowly but surely looking to separate themselves from the rest of the pack. But that just means that it gives us more to talk about with reference to a lot of the other teams that are trying to claw their way up into that conversation of being one of those possible perennial, formidable basketball teams that can knock off the Giants that right now have taken absolute control of the NBA. So good things on the horizon. I hope everyone has enjoyed their Thanksgiving weekend. We are back on the grind. And of course, I got to roll the red carpet out to my right-hand man, 50 grand NBA aficionado, my man Warren Shaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, my brother from another mother, representing for www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna and PNC. What's good, man? Welcome back to the land.
I appreciate it, man. And salute to all the fans, listeners of NBA Baseline. Good to be back. Happy to be talking NBA basketball. Like you said, an actual full month into this NBA season. A lot has been determined, but obviously a lot yet to be decided as well, too. So let's jump right in, man. We got a lot of great topics to discuss.
Yeah, man. A lot of good things to talk about. Earlier, a little bit later on in the show, we will discuss some of the rumors that might be swirling around in the NBA already. We still have another 2 months almost before the trade deadline, but clearly there are some players that are out there being talked about and that could possibly be moved. What kind of destinations could we be looking at for some of these guys? We'll get into that in our segment of the drop. And in a little bit, our main discussion, and we don't normally get into it early about teams that might already be red line, might be a flat line. But the Dallas Mavericks, despite this being considered one of the hardest schedules in the NBA to start the season off with, it may be too little too late, or has it? We will discuss the state of affairs for the Dallas Mavericks in this season, a season in which obviously they would love nothing more than to have Dirk Nowitzki give himself one more opportunity to make a run for the NBA title. But is it too little, too late? And of course, we got to cover the coast to coast where we discuss all the news happening in the association. So we appreciate you and yours continually plugging in, listening to the Baseline NBA podcast. Be sure to get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA, or get at me at GameFace Lee. The show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline. Hashtag up the baseline. Let us know who you are and what you're about. Available on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Microsoft TuneIn, Player FM, Google Music, and also available on the Roku channel. Simulcasted as well through the Sports Brothers Network. Shout out to the Sports Brothers. Be sure to check those guys out Monday through Friday. They cover everything happening in South Florida sports, but more importantly, they also cover all sports, and we also supplement them with the info of the NBA with the Baseline NBA podcast. So before we get into everything, of course, we got to get you plugged in. Make sure that you are ready to go for the NBA season. And while in the midst of the NBA season, to get the favorite gear that you want to wear, you got to go to fanessentials.net. Fanessentials.net has the latest and greatest in all the sports gear for your favorite teams across the boards of all sports, sporting genres. So be sure to go to www.fanessentials.net. When you go there and select your gear, prices start from $14.99 to $34.99 at the checkout. If you use Baseline as the promo code, you get 30% off of your first month. So be sure to go to www.fanessentials.net to get the essentials you need for this NBA season. You know how we do, and you know how we like to set it off. It's time now for the breakdown.
Time to break it
down. Time now for the breakdown. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw of the Baseline NBA podcast. And the topic of conversation that we're going to dig into is in reference to the Dallas Mavericks. The Dallas Mavericks is a basketball team. A lot could be said about this team because while the Southwest Division has really been dominated by the dynasty that is the San Antonio Spurs, an argument can be made that the success of the Dallas Mavericks ever since they've got that 7-foot, probably go down as one of the greatest international shooters and probably even one of the greatest shooters of all time up until maybe when Steph Curry retires or when Ray Allen makes it to the Hall of Fame. Dirk Nowitzki will arguably be in that conversation as one of the greatest shooters of all time. And during his tenure for the Dallas Mavericks, this Dallas Mavericks team has found themselves either in the playoffs, over 50 wins. Mark Cuban has had the luxury of basking in the glory of a Dallas Mavericks franchise that has always been in the breadth of conversation when it comes to the Western Conference, and more importantly, has held up the O'Brien Trophy back in 2011, pulling off one of the improbable upsets maybe of all time, next to the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Golden State Warriors a year ago. And Sean, when you look at this basketball team, we expected this team to go through struggles. We talked about them in our preview of the Southwest Division, and we knew that they probably were not going to be one of the top two teams in the Southwest Division. But I don't think we expected a team to basically only amass 2 wins out of the first 15 games. And understandable, though, their first 15 game of the season was arguably the toughest schedule you will probably see in all of the NBA. But I don't think anyone saw this coming for the Dallas Mavericks. And now we're already talking about how this season is just basically going to get put to the wayside.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. I mean, we think we had them maybe fourth in the Southwest, maybe the Pelicans finishing last, but New Orleans has found their stride a little bit and has actually surpassed the Dallas Mavericks as this early season has began. And you're right, it's tough. A lot of the Mavericks fans are saying, it's injuries. Dirk hasn't been healthy. He's only played in a handful of games. Darren Williams, as always, has only played in a handful of games. But they don't really have a whole lot of roster depth to begin with behind their starting lineup. They have a lot of, for lack of a better phrase, no-name guys, who are trying to make their way and make their name in the NBA, like a Dorian Finney-Smith. Obviously Dwight Powell we've heard of, but he's still kind of a fringe player, if you will. Justin Anderson, who I really like, he's still trying to develop. And that's basically their bench. Salah Mejri. Harrison Barnes has played well. I will say that, and the starter getting a lot of minutes, almost 38 minutes a night. But outside of that, man, it's been little to nothing that's gone right for the Mavs. And again, it's not just injuries; they're just not playing good basketball because they just don't have the requisite talent that they need to play at this level, especially with the schedule that you mentioned earlier to begin the season.
Yeah, it's kind of funny when you watch how the Dallas Mavericks play right now. It almost feels like Rick Carlisle is kind of stuck in limbo. I think he's so used to having such a veteran-laden basketball team. They don't completely overwhelm you with offense. They're usually a middle-of-the-pack type of team, and maybe even over the last couple of years, they've been more so of a maybe in the top 20, it's just funny because during our days, Shaw, when we talk about the Dallas Mavericks, the days of Nash and Finley and Nowitzki and Terry, those guys weren't afraid. And even Jason Kidd, the year they 2011 year when they won the championship, those guys weren't afraid to put the ball in the basket, but their calling card to them to ultimately winning a championship was defense. And it's the one thing that for the Dallas Mavericks, even as they go through their seasons of offensive struggles or maybe too much dependency on Dirk Nowitzki to pull them out of the depths of offensive solitude, they were a great, solid basketball team from a defensive perspective. They make the game maybe ugly enough to keep them in games, and they always give themselves a puncher's chance. It just looks like so far this season, especially now with teams upgrading their offensive repertoire, that the Dallas Mavericks look so far and beyond from being where other teams could possibly be. That the only thing you almost feel like, and you don't want to be a pessimist about it, but you only feel like it's going to get worse, even if they get back the necessary pieces like a Darren Williams or fully healthy Dirk Nowitzki to help them in their struggles so far this season.
Yeah, like I said, I just don't know how much those guys are really going to make a difference. Obviously, Dirk and Darren Williams are two elite players, all-stars. Dirk's going to be going to the Hall of Fame, and there's no doubt about that. But, that team with those guys may have maybe 2, maybe 3 more wins than they do currently. This is just not a roster that's built to compete in an ultra-competitive Western Conference and then even ultimately more competitive Southwest Division. I'm very concerned for this roster. And you know me, man. I love Rick Carlisle as a coach. I think he's done a great job, but this team, they have no playmaking at all. They can't rebound the basketball. Just no offense to speak of, and their defense is 21st in defensive rating as well too. It just doesn't seem like this is going to be a good year for this team. And a guy like Wesley Matthews, who I expected to have a bounce back year, well, he really needs somebody to get him the ball, and they need facilitators on this team. And Darren Williams has been hurt. J.J. Barea, we mentioned him yet. He's been hurt. He was playing pretty well to begin the year, but again, still in the losing effort. They have nobody to get Matthews the ball. Barnes is basically playing a lot of isolation basketball right now, just taking it and going himself. And they got to find a way to be more imaginative on offense. And that's something that I really would expect Carlisle to do. But again, he just doesn't have the horses in this one, and that's why I'm very concerned about this Mavericks team this season.
You're tuned to the Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Our segment of the breakdown as we're discussing this Dallas Mavericks. Is it panic mode for the Dallas Mavericks faithful? I want to go back to your point real quick, Shaw, with reference to someone facilitating the ball to guys like Harrison Barnes and Wesley Matthews. Seth Curry now is right now the starting point guard for this basketball team because Darren Williams is injured. And it's kind of funny to me, Shaw, because I feel like this to me is where we have this disconnect in our understanding of the type of coaches that are out there right now in the NBA. I take nothing from Rick Carlisle. He is a great coach. He has a championship, and he has proven that he can take mediocre talent and he can ultimately make them better. But I do also see one thing about Rick Carlisle, especially over the years, is that he has shown a propensity to give more to the veteran players than he will to the younger guys. I've seen guys like Powell, Jay Crowder, and now I'm seeing this with Seth Curry, where I don't know whether or not he knows what to do with these guys. I'm not saying Seth Curry is going to, be his brother Stephen Curry. I don't think that that's ever really going to be the case. But we've seen scenarios and situations where under the right leadership, under the right coach, you can maximize the talent for a young player who doesn't know his place in the NBA. And we've seen Seth Curry in the summer league. We've seen him, put up some monstrous numbers. I'm just wondering, it's for right now, we're talking about getting the ball to these playmakers and things of that nature. Can Rick Carlisle, is he the type of coach to help a guy like Seth Curry find his way to help this team at least be moderately successful going through these struggles?
Well, with respect to Seth Curry specifically, I think this is a Mavericks organization that was extremely excited about getting him and getting him away from Sacramento and having him become a bench scorer and a guy who could shoot the three and even do some playmaking. But I think the early part of the season, Williams was healthy. I think the first couple of games, Barea really kind of stepped in there and played some plus minutes. And it seemed like Carlisle maybe didn't have the necessary trust that he needed in Curry. I can't even remember what was going on in the preseason, if Curry was getting the minutes and things like that too. But they really wanted to lean on Wesley Matthews at the wing. They really expected Justin Anderson to kind of really step up as well too. And I think Curry might have been squeezed out for the minutes to begin with. Now, the last 10 games or so, he's getting almost 30 minutes a game, and his season average is roughly between 27 and 28 minutes now for the season because he's had to play such plus minutes. So Carlisle's being pressed and forced to play him a little bit more, maybe than he'd even like to. But I think Curry is a guy who proved he can play in this league. He is still more of a specialist than he is a full-time starter, and that's not taking anything away from him. But yeah, he's going to need the minutes to be productive on a regular basis. He's not a guy who can really do a whole lot in 10, 15 minutes a game. He's going to need 25 minutes or so to be productive, and I think he's done that thus far. But it's just a matter of if and when those guys get healthy, will Carlisle still have that trust in them to deploy him out there?
All right, and so now let's go ahead and shift our focus, Shaw, to Dwight Powell. I've loved what this guy was bringing to the table. A lot of energy. Reminds me a little bit like Aaron Gordon. And no, I'm not talking about through skin complexion. I mean through athleticism and playing with a level of toughness. He's a real physical body, but he is a complete contrast to the level of play from a Dirk Nowitzki. And I'm not talking about from the fact that Dirk Nowitzki shoots the basketball. I'm talking from a skill set perspective because it feels like Dwight Powell's game has to be down in the blocks, which is something that Dirk Nowitzki has never had to deal with really ever through his career. He's managed, the early part maybe to establish as a 7-footer, somewhat of a post game, but now that he has that one-step fadeaway shot and he shoots the three, he can live out in the perimeter all he wants. We don't know if that'll ever be the case from Dwight Powell, but what is it that you see from him that at least for Dallas Mavericks fans, there should be a level of optimism in the sense that we're talking about this team getting back on its feet and obviously moving to that youth movement. I mean, it can't be that they're going to rely on Andrew Bogut and Wesley Matthews to pull them out of the doldrums. At some point, you're going to have to start looking at if there's no realistic chance to make it either in the 6th, 7th, or 8th seed of the Western Conference, that at least you're going to see some vast improvements from your youth. So are you going to see that from a guy like Dwight Powell? What's your take on his game?
Well, I like him. I think a lot of people like him in general. Knowing that he's an energy guy who's learned how to shoot the basketball a little bit. Obviously he was a great rebounder and the guy who's just going to hustle. I'm not quite sure what's been up with his minutes though. To begin this season and why they're not deploying him out there on a more regular basis, because in the minutes he has played well. His per 36 averages are always very, very good, and there's no difference between that this season as well right now. For whatever reason, he gets 15-ish minutes a night, and I think as much as they've been hurt, he's a guy who could definitely be seeing minutes in the upper 20s and lower 30s if necessary, and I think it is necessary. So I think it's a great point that you bring up, because I like Dwight Powell's game. I don't know, what do you think about his game? Because to me, there's no reason he shouldn't be getting more minutes on a regular basis, especially with this roster.
Cowspiracy theory, man. Cowspiracy theory. I believe again that Rick Carlisle has an affinity for the veteran guys. I think that he believes that only through the veteran players will he gives himself a chance to find, another opportunity to play in the playoffs. And rather than kind of riding the storm, okay, and allowing some of these young guys to go through their growing pains, even in the midst of a tough schedule like this, I think that he is actually undercutting the opportunities that he could be giving himself later on as this season weighs on, that this Dallas Mavericks team would give themselves as a realistic chance or opportunity to get into the playoffs. You cannot tell me that Mark Cuban is going to wave a magic wand and suddenly draw or make this block or figure out a way, for his constituents to make a blockbuster trade to get a quote unquote missing piece that's going to catapult them into any kind of conversation of being in the playoffs. There's a reason why Dwight Powell has been on this team. There's a reason why you went out and you got Seth Curry. There's a reason why you spent a ton of money on Harrison Barnes. You obviously understand there needs to be a go-between. And look, the luxury of Harrison Barnes is validated by having him out there because you paid him a ton of money to do it. You're not paying Dwight Powell a ton of money, but yet the things that Dwight Powell does from a 4-5 position perspective and his versatility defensively, can rebound the basketball, even though this team is basically dead last in rebounding the basketball. To me, there is no reason why you cannot find minutes on the floor for him. And again, I just believe, and this is nothing against Rick Carlisle. There's some coaches that this is how they are. This is the way they roll. And owners have to live and die with it. You just got a guy that just, hey, if the guy has less than 2 years of experience in the NBA, I can't play him. I ain't got the time for it. Don't have don't want him on the basketball court more than what I need to have him on there for. And I feel like, again, talent like Dwight Powell gets undermined because of it. I feel like you saw that with Jay Crowder. And now look at what Jay Crowder's doing for the Boston Celtics. Again, it's a tightrope that a coach like Rick Carlisle walks, because if you give the guy opportunity to play numerous minutes, and let's say it's in a contract year, then it forces the hand of a guy like Mark Cuban to have to shell out money that he probably would not have had the opportunity to shell out had they went after this guy or threw the money at that guy when he was a restricted free agent. So this is what I mean, because you are so veteran dependent that at times when you don't let the young kids get out there on the basketball court perform, it actually compromises what could be a long-term solution to a short-term problem.
No, I agree. I think, and again, I like Carlisle, like I said, but I guess what's been happening is Barnes has been playing more of the 4 while Dirk was out, and I guess that's what they've been doing, and then they figure out which 3 they're going to start. And I guess that's between Finney Smith or between not Harrison, but between Wesley Matthews and Justin Anderson. Those guys play the 2 and 3 position, and Barnes slides to the 4. I really just don't see why Powell hasn't gotten the minutes in this situation. But again, Dirk is back now for the time being as we record the show. Came back, played relatively well in 27 minutes over the weekend, and another blowout loss, if you will. But there's definitely reason to be concerned about this team and this roster, and even the way that Carlisle is coaching right now, because I don't think he understands what's happening. He's truly trying to figure out the parts that he has and figure out who really is good and who can play these minutes. But this rotation is going to need to get kind of figured out at some point, because if Barea comes back, and then we haven't even mentioned Devin Harris, he's supposed to be back as well too. That point guard situation is going to get real dicey, and then that's going to slide somebody to the 2, and that's going to make the wing position a little bit more dicey too. So a lot to be figured out in Dallas. but it just hasn't started off this way. And I just did not see them being this bad. But now it kind of looks like, well, why wouldn't they have been this bad? Especially when you said with the tough start to the season that they had in terms of the schedule. Looking at the roster now with clearer eyes, it's like, hey, maybe we should have seen this coming.
Maybe so, Saw. But I think at the same time as well too, I don't think that we expected, quality play like we did from the Houston Rockets. I knew that this was like the Houston Rockets is clearly going to be a basketball team that's going to run up the basketball score. But given the fact that they've got such a dynamic player in James Harden, and really the uptick of his gameplay has actually helped the rest of the roster that's around him. And we talk about how, in some ways that while we're completely enamored in what Russell Westbrook is doing, it's not completely translating to wins all the time out there for the Oklahoma City Thunder, with the expectations that this is now Westbrook unleashed. We're talking about Harden here, and Harden being unleashed since Dwight Howard has gone over to Atlanta, and surprisingly in their conference, because we know that the Southwest Division is still going to be much more competitive than the Northwest from the perspective of the dominance of the San Antonio Spurs. And then, the Memphis Grizzlies, again, another veteran-laden team, but just knows how to win basketball games. That could, very well be the second most competitive division we're talking about here with the Southwest, or maybe flip-flop with the Northwest. We're talking about James Harden. They are actually winning basketball games that a lot of people don't expect them to win because of it. And I just feel like when you look at that dynamic and you see how quickly things have fallen apart for the Dallas Mavericks, the turnaround time for them to get this together and figure it out, I just don't know if there's enough wiggle room for them to figure it out, do that, and still put themselves in the mix to eventually be in the conversation of the playoffs, which again is a rarity in itself, because the Dallas Mavericks is always a basketball team that you talk about at the end of the season making a playoff run. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And this was The Breakdown. Time now for The Drop. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw of The Baseline NBA podcast. Topic for The Drop this week. Shaw, you amaze me sometimes when you come up with these titles. Holiday shopping.
That's right, man. Black Friday, Cyber Monday,
Yeah, exactly. But maybe for some of these teams that might lose the players that they're trying to give up, hopefully they get something back. It could be Black Friday for them if this trade doesn't go right, if these guys don't produce in the way that it needs to. But the focus of our subject is going to be on players who very early right now, are in the conversation of possibly being traded. We've talked about a few of these guys in the offseason, but the way that we had looked at it from that perspective back in the beginning of the season was there's no way that you can foreseeably believe that these guys are going to continue being successful or even help this team become successful unless a move is made. And the likelihood, because of their contract, because of where they are as far as on the depth of the roster chart and the things of that nature, if they're in the coach's doghouse, the likelihood is they probably are not going to be with this same basketball team by the trade deadline. But it is interesting, though, Shaw, that as early as we are, only within less than 20 games into the season or so, that the conversation about these trade rumors seem to be much stronger and are growing much stronger well before we get to All-Star Weekend. And so when you look at guys like Greg Monroe, Rudy Gay, Brandon Knight, Ricky Rubio, Zach LaVine, or even Enes Kanter, clearly quality players, maybe put on other teams, can certainly help possibly put a team over the top, get them to that next level, or very much so a disaster waiting to happen unless they get rid of them for the teams that they currently are playing on.
Exactly. I mean, I think when you mentioned that to begin with, in terms of this holiday shopping thing, for some teams that would be trading away players, it might be addition by subtraction. If they're able to get some draft picks or future considerations down the line, maybe even cash considerations, whatever it is, because certain guys in these situations just aren't happy and it's just not working. Again, the name we're all familiar with and we've heard 100 times over, Greg Monroe. I'm looking at this guy now in Milwaukee where he's falling out of the starting rotation. That's a little bit startling. Was playing relatively well off the bench, but has started to have some problems. Not getting as many minutes in the last 5 games or so, and just I don't know if the Milwaukee Bucks want anything to do with this guy moving forward. He's definitely somebody who can help a roster. He's definitely somebody who has a nice post-up game, still a rebounder, is a good passer for a big man. So there's a market for his skill set. Again, he's not a stretch 4, stretch 5 by any stretch of the imagination. He's more traditional in that sense where he needs to be kind of on the block and can shoot some mid-range shots. But Milwaukee has no use for him. It's Giannis's team right now. It's Jabari's team right now. Milton, may be back by the end of the season. And those 3 guys who they're really going to try to build around. And again, we've talked about it 100 times too. John Hammond's been on our show, the general manager for the Bucks, and they want to build around Henson. And that was really his core 4. He did not mention Monroe when he spoke to us last year. So that says a lot about where Monroe stands for the Milwaukee Bucks specifically. And he's a guy who can help a team like Toronto, who's looking for a power forward. We talked about it last show, I think it was, where Nerlens Noel was a guy who was mentioned that Toronto was looking for. If you're looking at Noel, you could be looking at Monroe as well too. So we can start there and kind of get your thoughts on him. But there's, again, a lot of guys here who have a lot of value to other teams.
Well, Greg Monroe, to me, I don't want to go out on a limb and say Greg Monroe, is a disappointment. Greg Monroe is exactly who he was when he came out of Detroit. Greg Monroe was the odd man out in Detroit with Stan Van Gundy at the time, when he had Josh Smith and then you had Andre Drummond, simply because he wasn't able to play the kind of defense that I think he wanted. Now, clearly Van Gundy, understanding that Monroe was still a favorite in Detroit, obviously kept him, and Josh Smith was the more movable piece. Plus, he was the much more disgruntled guy. I mean, he was like the Grinch up there in the Motown, in the Motor City. So as far as I'm concerned, Greg Monroe has pretty much been the kind of player that he has always been. I think what was a little disappointing was the fact that, and maybe even to general manager Hammond's credit, he was hoping that Monroe, being in a city that was obviously going to pay him a lot of money to be the kind of player that they were looking for him to be, the fact that you have a coach like Jason Kidd, and I'm not blaming Jason Kidd, but the fact that you have a guy like Jason Kidd and you got a guy like Monroe, I just don't see where it was going to translate to Jason Kidd properly figuring out a way to get Greg Monroe to buy into the things that has made the Milwaukee Bucks as good and as versatile a basketball team as they need to be. Now, with that being said, fine, you can't get what you want out of Monroe. I honestly think that they had opportunities in this offseason to have moved this guy. So the fact that you weren't able to do anything, and let's just assume the fact that they just fielded calls and there was nothing flying in their direction, I still feel like if you are Jason Kidd, you need to figure out a way to get this guy to contribute in ways that clearly the Bucks, if the Bucks were completely fine as they are, this would be a top 5 basketball team, but they're not. Okay. You don't want him to be a starter? Fine. Then figure out a way to make him a premier 6 guy coming off the bench. I just feel like there's still some inconsistencies with the way things are being handled. And unfortunately, because of it, Greg Monroe is being compromised for it. If you put him on a basketball team where someone uses his height and uses his offensive capabilities, ergo like a guy like Enes Kanter over the last 2 seasons now, almost 2 seasons with the Oklahoma City Thunder. We'll get to him in a moment. I mean, clearly now you're putting a profile for a legitimate big that can score around the basket and do some good things for you. I just feel like for Greg Monroe, clearly his time is up in Milwaukee. But if you are the Milwaukee Bucks, basically now playing shadow games with the way that you're playing him is not making him an enticing player to be thrown out there if the idea is that you're intending to move him.
Yeah, 18 minutes a night isn't going to cut it for a guy that they're paying all that money to. And I suspect we may see some showcase minutes, in the upcoming weeks where maybe he might get in the 25-minute range, so they can show that he still has something to prove, or that he can still play rather. And then maybe the deals will start coming in. But right now, his value is rock bottom because of exactly how they've used him, or not used him, I guess really is a more appropriate term. And they've really just kind of made him the odd man out in Milwaukee. But I definitely feel like this guy, again, I don't want to overvalue him, but I still feel like he has a lot to give, especially from an offensive standpoint. We know he's not a good defender. He's never going to be that. But I mean, he can get in the way and be somewhat of a deterrent, if you will, and when defending the post. And he can definitely try harder. I mean, a lot of that's still on him too. But if I'm a team in need of a big, and I know the big man is dying in the NBA, but if you are one, Monroe is definitely a guy you could do a lot worse than if you're shopping.
I can give you a destination if a team is willing to roll the dice in putting him out there. How about the Miami Heat? Okay, he is your Chris Bosh-like type player, a guy that can hit perimeter shots. He's not going to overwhelm you completely rebounding the basketball, but he can do just enough. And he can be just enough of an intimidating force, not completely that much, but I think under a coach like Eric Spoelstra, he can get better defensive effort from Greg Monroe more times than often than what I think he's giving the Milwaukee Bucks at this moment in time under Jason Kidd.
Yeah, I like that. I like that assessment too. And again, they definitely have a hole at the power forward position. He'd be better than anybody they have right now. You're looking at Derek Williams and Josh McRoberts and James Johnson, all the guys that they've thrown out there at the power forward.
I mean, my God, they're still flashing the Udonis Haslem ring to bring him out of retirement. Like, the guy should have retired like 3 years ago. They keep bringing him back. They have no choice.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's a tough situation there. But as we talk about the Heat, the guy that has also been mentioned there and been rumored and definitely wants out is Rudy Gay. And he's been linked to the Heat. He's been linked into OKC Thunder. We've talked a little bit about it on previous shows, but nothing has changed in that on that front. And as the Kings continue to struggle, Yeager hasn't really been able to get this team on the right path just yet. Gay is a guy who could definitely help either one of those franchises or other teams too, because I think he's matured a little bit in terms of being a more efficient player, where he doesn't need to shoot 40 shots a game, to get his 35 points or whatever he's going to do. I think he understands, listen, I can be a guy who gets 17 shots a game, whatever like that, score 17 to 21 points, and be a contributor and can rebound as well too. So I think he can help somebody because his mentality has changed, but he hates Sacramento. He doesn't want to be there. So the Kings have got to figure out a way to get him out of there.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you. This is one of those multifaceted players that kind of slid under the radar because we more so looked at his demeanor and how he was as a basketball player than really looked at his overall numbers. And the overall numbers really say that Rudy Gay is a really good basketball player. I think early injuries during the beginning of his season really kind of dampened the reliability factor of him being able to contribute. And so much expectations were put on him in his years when he played for the Memphis Grizzlies. And, it's interesting now, Shaw, when you look at veteran guys that can offer a little bit more, I feel like this is his time, his opportunity to make that one last good push. And maybe so for a team like, to your point, I mean, I guess maybe a team like the Miami Heat or, maybe a team like the Los Angeles Clippers. We talk about this so much about what some of these veteran guys can do that doesn't necessarily register on what you see on stat sheets individually as much as what it can mean as a composite sketch for the team statistics and the analytics that go into it. Rudy Gay can be a difference maker on quite a few different teams. And again, it doesn't matter if whether or not he's a starter or if he's someone that's coming off the bench, but I think he's soured himself so much because he's been around more of the losing culture than the winning culture. And the unfortunate part is that the timing of some of the trades that have happened to Rudy Gay has been around when the teams have gone on to be more successful. And I think that has left a bitter taste in his mouth as well, too. He's always wound up being sent somewhere where it just doesn't seem like the team is as successful enough, and then they get rid of him when the team is ready to turn that corner or is no longer in the quote-unquote rebuilding mode. I think he finally wants to be somewhere where he feels like his contributions actually mean something and is significant to an actual, team being in the playoff picture, possibly making a championship run.
Yeah, well, that's not Miami. So, and again, I mean, he may not have any choice in the matter. I mean, he said he wants to leave. He's not going to resign in Sacramento no matter what, but this is a guy, like I said, 19 and a half a game, 6 rebounds, shooting 46%, only taking 15 shots per game. He can help a lot of teams.
Just send him back to Memphis. Yeah. Listen, look, Memphis might not like him. I mean, like Parsons ain't even on a basketball court. I'm just saying, it could happen.
Memphis is striving, though. Memphis, as we record their show, they're 11-6, so they're doing very well, even without Parsons being out there. But it would be an interesting, coming home story, if you will, if he were able to get back to Memphis or somewhere like that. Because again, his scoring, it can be used anywhere in the NBA, and there's not a lot of teams where he couldn't go and immediately be a starter, or like you said, be an amazing sixth man.
Let me tell you something, and I know this sounds crazy. I'm not going to try and play GM. We got our man Mullinax when we bring him on the show every now and again. He can do that for us. But here's my take on this. If you were to pull off a trade to bring Rudy Gay, wouldn't you like to probably see Rudy play the 2 position while Chandler plays the 3? It's not like Rudy Gay can't play defense, man. He could play some defense, and his length makes up for what people, I think, at times I think they overevaluate, they overestimate a player's defensive liabilities. Like, all right, well, he's too long. He doesn't move his feet quick enough or anything like that. In playing the 2-guard position, the purpose for you to shoot the basketball. You got Rudy Gay at 6'7", 6'8", with a wingspan dang near 7 foot tall. I would put him on anyone that's going to shoot the basketball, just for the sake of saying his gameplay can still translate to helping this team score the basketball, which again is still one of the liabilities for the Memphis Grizzlies, man.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, it would be an interesting story, really to see if they entertain that. But I think the Kings, if they commit to moving him, will have a very, very good market for his services and should be able to get a decent return. The only issue, obviously, is that he is in the contract here, so the team trading for him would need to have some assurances that he'd resign, or again, if they just want him for a 1-year lease to kind of see how it works out, fine. But that doesn't seem to be the way of the NBA right now. When trading for certain guys, they want to make sure that they give up assets, that they can keep that guy around for a little while. But I still think Rudy Gay has a lot to give. Obviously, only 30 years old and is having a great season.
All right, Shaw, let's go ahead and quickly move on. This is one that I really want to get into. Ricky Rubio and Zach LaVine. Look, the other night, Zach LaVine just dropped 31. And I mean, he just basically like RIP'd Alex Len. He RIP'd my man JaVale McGee.
Right.
Although that, I don't know how many times JaVale McGee is like, he's like, I forget which, I guess it's all of the shooter experience games. You die and somebody's got to come over and just resuscitate you. How many times have we resuscitated JaVale McGee, man? Like, as great as he could possibly be, and some of the athleticism that he does is freakishly unreal. My man gets posterized a little bit too much so far this season, man.
For real.
Steve Kerr's got to have a sit-down conversation. He's like, listen, man, you can't be on the highlight reel for every one of these up and come, little springsters up here, bro. He, like, seriously.
What Wiggins did to him over the weekend was just
seriously, like, come on, man. Like, I'm still pulling that he's going to wind up being the starting center for the Golden State Warriors.
Whoa. Yeah, maybe they're D-League affiliate.
Listen. Have you seen Zaza Pachulia recently? Zaza Pachulia is not like, he's like looking like the Hillary Clinton of the starting center positions for the Golden State Warriors right now. You all right with it, but you ain't really feeling it if you're talking about trying to win a championship with that. And I'm not saying that JaVale McGee is going to win you a championship. I'm just saying that JaVale McGee's effort and the fact that he does play better defense in the middle at times could make an argument that minutes might get taken away from Zaza Pachulia if he does not get this thing together. Because you cannot tell me that the Warriors are going to try and make a play during the trade deadline to try and shore up something that clearly is going to be their Achilles heel throughout this season. And I'm just saying, if Steve Kerr is going to have any kind of confidence in the versatility of his front court, now I'm sorry we're getting off the track of the subject here, but if there's going to be any versatility of that, he's going to have to start getting minutes for guys like McGee and McAdoo and those guys, because you can't tell me you're going to be giving Zaza Pachulia 28, 29 minutes a night and think you're going to get by with a front court the way that he plays. It's just not happening.
No, well, they're not going to do that. I think he's starting to give McGee a little bit more minutes, trying to see if he can earn the trust, if you will. So it's a little trial by fire, but we all know the Warriors like to play small. Well, Green will go to the 5, Durant will go to the 4, et cetera, et cetera. Iguodala will slide in there and do his thing at the 3, and Clay and Curry will be out there as well. So, we'll see, if they need to shore that up a little bit more. But again, bringing up this conversation about McGee, as he did get posterized by LaVine, got posterized by Wiggins, is the Minnesota Timberwolves. And when we talk about their trade assets per se, they're trying to trade one of their young guns to get a veteran guy to kind of help them along, because Tibbs doesn't feel like they're learning and doing enough there. And this is where maybe even a guy like Garnett, even just being on the bench, could have been a great asset and help to them. But Tibbs wants a guy who he can play. He wants a guy who can really go out there and give him, 25, 30 minutes a night in a veteran leadership role on the court, not just on the sidelines next to him, when it comes to coaching and being in practice, things like that too. So Rubio, LaVine, and even Gorgui Dieng are the 3 assets that they have that they'd be willing to part with. And if anybody were to have interest in Shabazz Muhammad, I guess they'd do that as well too. But Wiggins and Towns are untouchable. But those other 3 guys, if you call, you can probably have either one of those or either of those guys if you make the right offer.
I tell you, I think it's absolutely ludicrous that LaVine is actually in the conversation, but I understand it if it's going to be for a veteran that, what I'm saying?
Let me interrupt real quick though, because I was watching the game versus Golden State. We're talking about them a lot, but LaVine looked great. But is he a difference maker type player? Or is he a guy who can really just score? Is he gonna? I mean, obviously, he can jump and he can dunk, and now he shoots a three and everything like that. But is he a difference maker?
But to
I
your
look
question,
at him and I feel like Kevin Martin. That's what I see.
Okay, but to your point though,
Hops.
but with Hops, I mean, Hops is just like here to Saturn. I mean, no, but to your point, Shaw, I think this is again a question of the direction of this basketball team. Do they have enough offensive firepower that he becomes something of a chess piece now that you can move? Okay, like there used to be an offensive reliance on Ricky Rubio, all right, because it was Ricky Rubio and Kevin Love. Now you have Andrew Wiggins, and Andrew Wiggins is proven to be that guy that he can get you 35. He can get you 40 points. He's the type of guy that could probably get you 30, 40 points in a Kawhi Leonard type of statistical performance. Takes 10, 15 shots, but gets to the free throw line, maybe takes 6, 7, 8 shots, and next thing you know, he's dropping 30 points. That could very well be the kind of person that you have in Andrew Wiggins that makes someone like a Zach LaVine expendable. Okay. But at the same time, when you see that kind of athleticism, that kind of versatility, and he is improving his play from a defensive perspective. If you're Tom Thibodeau, I mean, do you basically say we're willing to give that up for that veteran guy that you're looking for to help you win those basketball games that you're clearly not winning right now? I'm saying it's understandable if you're going to tell me Gorgie Jang, because you got enough front court players that you should be giving yourself that opportunity to do that if Gorgie Jang isn't completely wowing you. Ricky Rubio, we've been saying this from jump. He should have been gone. Okay, fine. But Zach LaVine? I mean, if Zach LaVine continues to improve, then it just really becomes a question of he just doesn't fit with what Tom Thibodeau wants to do. So you better make sure that you land your X marks the spot on the person that you're getting to facilitate where you want this Timberwolves team to move forward with.
Well, I mean, and let's be clear. Listen, I don't think they are shopping LaVine. I think he is available in the right offer.
Clearly, but don't dangle him out the Macy's window for me if you have no intentions to move him. We're talking holiday shopping, right? Okay.
Yeah, it is holiday shopping. And again, you're looking for a deal, and LaVine is not going to be the bargain basement. He's still full price. You can't Black Friday him, can't use no coupons. They're going to want, full market value for him. But again, Rubio and Jang are their priorities in terms of the guys that they'd like to move. But sometimes what you like isn't always what you get. And if they really want to make that move, and with Thibodeau being the coach and general manager or president of basketball ops, he may have to take a hard look if he gets the right offer for a guy like LaVine. I think there's a very good possibility. If it came about, they would have to look at it, and maybe LaVine would be out there. But like you said, he's making a great case to be one of the building blocks of this roster on this team with Cat and Wiggins. And it would be a shame if he were the one to go. But again, that is definitely not their first option.
2-time slam dunk champion and does 360 slam dunks from the free throw line in practice, not the game, but practice. Zach LaVine, man, let them start putting them up there for any kind of trade rumors, man. Man, shoot, you must be crazy. All right, Shaw, let's quickly move on to the two guys that we did have an opportunity to talk about a little bit earlier on, Brandon Knight and Enes Kanter. With Brandon Knight, I think it's a foregone conclusion. I think everybody knows that there's no way that they're going to be able to keep Bledsoe, Brandon, and Devin Booker. Something has got to give. I really feel like Devin Booker, while he is thriving under the circumstances right now, and then I think now the emergence of TJ Warren, something is going to have to give. And if you are the Phoenix Suns, you've hit and missed with your trades and your acquisitions for the last few years. Get this one right. And if you are Brandon Knight, look, man, there's quite a few basketball teams right now that could clearly utilize his services. Clearly could be a basketball team that, moving forward, could be put in the right direction. Even if it's a basketball team that might be struggling, there's a team down in Philly, you know what I'm saying, that's got a little process thing going on over there. That might be a nice destination and look to get some young pieces that the Phoenix Suns can always continue to flip around, turn around, smack it up, and do Belle Biv DeVoe type things with, except for creating a winning culture there. But a guy like Brandon Knight, man, if he gets moved, he is definitely a commodity that is worth looking at because, again, he's one of your guys. You've interviewed him. We've seen his body of work. He's a legit point guard that can score the basketball. He plays decent defense. He's a Kentucky byproduct. The guy has got winning all over his face. he's definitely one of those guys that we're not going to talk about, but I think really could be an impact guy put in the right destination if he does get traded.
Yeah, I mean, he's a great dude. He really is. He's a quality individual, class guy, takes care of his community, all of that. I mean, he understands the business of the NBA. He's, obviously been moved twice already in his career, and is now potentially being pushed out into Phoenix as well, too. I love what you're saying in terms of, Philly being a potential destination. They definitely need a point guard. You can argue the Brooklyn Nets could use him, with his services, and he could play the 1 or the 2 alongside.
No. That's reserved for Isaiah Whitehead.
Oh, I forgot about the man crush you had on Whitehead. But nevertheless, Brooklyn would seem like a potential destination if he could somehow beat out Whitehead for minutes. And then I think Dallas, even that situation, I think in even all the guys we've mentioned, really, Dallas could really be players for all of these guys if they were to try to make a run to get back into this thing during this regular season. So I like Knight again. I just think he's a good player. He's an above average passer. Yes, he does like to shoot first, but he can dish the rock, and I think you saw him doing that last year before the emergence of Booker and Knight and Bledsoe's both injuries. So I like to see him get into a situation where he can really be a contributor.
All right, finally, Shaw, Enes Kanter from out of the Oklahoma City Thunder. Look, man, Enes Kanter, he is such an enigma. Like, I don't understand this dude. Like, you would think that the way that he plays the game, he should legitimately be starting for a basketball team. Yeah. And yet he just cannot find himself, even surpassing Steven Adams, which really tells you that, this guy, I don't know if he's just getting by on him knowing that he's really a talented dude, but he just has not put it together so it is translated into being a quality, reliable, legitimate front court player for an NBA basketball team. And then to have the outright nerve to talk smack to Kevin Durant while your team is just getting, lambasted on the basketball court. That's just doubly like, if you're Billy Donovan, be like, yo, dude, I should send you back to Mexico as far as I'm concerned. But you know what I'm saying? Like, as far as I'm concerned, like, how does this just not translate where Enes Kanter is not somewhere starting for an NBA basketball team?
Well, I don't know. I think
that might be what's holding back the idea that anyone who's going to make a play for him or trade for him has got to be committed to the idea that they're going to want to start him. And I don't know if they're seeing enough that's making them say, is it really worth the hassle and the headache?
Well, I mean, it's funny that this seems to be a recurring theme with a lot of these guys we're talking about. They're pretty much offensive weapons first. They don't play a lot of defense. We're not going to have time to talk about all the guys that are be mentioned. But if you're the Denver Nuggets, they have a bunch of guys who they can move to. I think you could look at them moving Nurkic or even Fareed eventually. Finally, Wilson Chandler's another guy who they should potentially move. But again, keeping the conversation kind of focused on OKC here and Kanter, offensively is where he stars. And it's not necessarily a big man league anymore, but I was fooled in terms of what I saw in the playoffs where Donovan seemed to play Adams and Kanter together. And Kanter has some really big preseason games too, which indicated to me that he was going to be a huge part of their plans going into the season. He's still only getting 19 minutes a game, 12 points, roughly 6 rebounds. Again, not bad numbers, but you'd figure he'd be a guy who'd be over 20 minutes a game easily, 25 per se. I'm stunned that Sabonis is starting over him. Nothing against Sabonis. I just didn't see that coming. And Laverne is also getting minutes. Ilyasova was there getting minutes too before they traded him and moved him along. I just don't know what it is with Kanter and Donovan and the OKC organization. Nothing has come out where Kanter seems to be upset. He's like, hey, he plays his minutes, doesn't really say anything about it. If he gets 25 or plus minutes or more, he seems to produce. But for whatever reason, Donovan doesn't want to deploy him out there. So I think that you can definitely have him in the right situation, in the right scenario.
All right, well, we're going to keep our eyes open. Whip out your shopping bags, NBA shoppers. There might be some players available for you to make purchase on.
For the Lolo,
you know what I'm saying? For free 99, maybe, possibly. Who knows? But definitely as the holiday season draws near, these names will be popping up quite often through all of the rumored sports NBA channels and websites. And, you definitely have to keep your eye on them because it could be one of those guys that wind up being on your favorite basketball team and could actually make an impact for them to actually make a push towards the playoffs. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And this was The Drop. Time now to go coast to coast discussing the news in the association. You ready to rock and roll, Mr. Shaw?
Absolutely, man. Let's rock.
I feel like it's been so long since we've done a coast to coaster. It's just, I don't know what it is. Just
a couple weeks.
Yeah, a couple of weeks, man. I feel like we've gone galaxy to galaxy. That's how long it's been.
Oh.
Anyway, Chris Humphries is breaking backboards. What? what you talking about? Chris Humphries breaking backboards at practice. What's all that about?
Who knows, man? Don't know what this room was made out of, but the pictures were the proof in the pudding, if you will. He definitely shattered the glass. His teammates were definitely having a lot of fun with it. They were throwing balls out the glass, trying to, I guess, finish it off, if you will, from what he started. But Atlanta Hawks tweeted out, practice had to end because Chris Humphries shattering backboards like it's 1995, man.
Oh my goodness, I can't believe Dwight Howard is like the strain right now of these Atlanta Hawks. I don't know nobody on this Atlanta Hawks team. All of them got crazy split personalities, no question. All right, Marvin Williams, Paul George, both of those guys are going to be out for about a week. D'Angelo Russell suffered an injury himself, so he's going to be out for a couple of weeks. Chandler Parsons and TJ Warren also out indefinitely, man. It's MASH unit time all over again in the NBA.
Yeah, man, I hate this time of the year. We're pretty soon we're going to be coming up on flu seasons, or we're going to be out with the flu as well, too. But these guys all suffering different injuries. Paul George, especially, is the biggest name on this list. Hate to see him go out for a week. The Pacers definitely need him. Although they played a little bit better as of late, he's the key to their success. Russell with I think he had platelets injected into his knee or something to that effect. So to see him out, and I don't think he's lived up to quite the hype that even Oliver Maroney were talking about to begin the year. He's played well, but not quite as well as we'd hoped. So maybe the injury was what was slowing him down. And Chandler Parsons and TJ Warren out indefinitely for their respective teams. Warren off to a great start to the season. Parsons hasn't really done much for anything in Memphis, but Memphis has been moving along without him either way. Hopefully all these guys can get back in the fold really quickly.
All right, Reggie Jackson, he's expecting to return very shortly for the Detroit Pistons. And I got to admit, Shaw, we talked about the services of Ish Smith. He has really done a great job filling in while Reggie Jackson has been gone. The Pistons had a winning record, going up to this particular point. But, and they've been faltering. They've been skittish over the last few games. But still, it's definitely not the fault of Ish Smith. But it could be a welcome sign that Reggie Jackson is going to be back in that lineup for the Pistons.
Yeah, they just need another guy. They just need another guy who's going to be consistent on a regular basis. And he and Van Gundy, they have a special relationship where, Van Gundy trusts him to a certain degree. Again, not afraid to pull him, not afraid to pull any of his starters at any point. But Reggie Jackson needs that tough love, and he and Van Gundy have connected, and they need him out there for sure. And I think Andre Drummond will be happy to have him out there, and so as well Tobias Harris too. He's going to be a sight for sore eyes, if you will. Hopefully the Pistons can get back on the right track and get above 500 and potentially get back into the conversation for the playoffs.
All right. Russell Westbrook ties LeBron James for the passes him for the most active triple doubles, and he does it like 400 games sooner than LeBron James. What does that make of Russell Westbrook?
He's a monster. He just won't stop. And although the team is just barely above 500, it's no fault of his. We knew this was going to be his mantra for the NBA season, and I think he has a firm grasp on potentially winning that MVP from a statistical standpoint. The team may just not have enough wins for him, but he just continues to go. I continue to wonder if he can keep up this pace and keep up this energy every single night. What is his usage rate going to be come February, and how many miles will he put on his body by that time when we get to the All-Star break. But nevertheless, these triple doubles are amazing, and they're chunky. Extremely chunky, gaudy triple doubles, not just 10, 10, and 10, 17, 15, 13. I mean, he's doing everything he needs to do for that OKC team, man. But he definitely needs some more help.
One thing that I do like about the triple doubles that we're seeing, because I don't think it's a question about his points and the rebounds, it's the assists, and what that tells me is that even if it's pseudo belief in his teammates to score the basketball, it's still some form of belief that Westbrook has in getting the ball to his guys and them going out there and making plays for him. I think that speaks volumes, and I think that that's something that is going to kind of have a much longer lasting effect down the road. I just don't think that you're seeing the instant gratification for what you're seeing from Russell Westbrook in his endeavors in getting these triple doubles. But as this season continues to weigh on, and I think in years to come, when you see a person doing what Russell Westbrook is doing, what that might mean for other guys who are currently on this roster who may potentially get on this Oklahoma City Thunder team's roster, to know that they got someone that can facilitate the basketball like he's doing at the clip that he's doing right now. I mean, he is going to shatter the triple doubles record, I believe, if he continues at this pace, which to me, I won't be completely surprised by it, because that's just Brody right there. That boy, he's just Brody. Enough said, he's just Brody. All right, Shaw. Finally, to end more so on a somber note, obviously the NBA family always stays together and always recognizes when tragedies affect players. Channing Frye, Zach Randolph losing family members. Channing Frye really getting the worst of it over the last month or so. But these two guys losing family members, they're out indefinitely because of deaths in their family. We just want to make sure that we extend our condolences and wishes to their respective families. And again, the NBA surrounding themselves and making sure that they are looking out for their players during their time of need.
Yeah, couldn't have said any better myself. Definitely, we want to send out our condolences, as you alluded to. You know, we don't know these guys personally like that, but definitely sad to hear when anybody loses anybody, especially members of your immediate family, your parents, and things like that. I mean, Channing Frye, like you said, just the last month has been horrendous for him, and we definitely hope he can get back in the mental state where he can get back to the NBA, but more importantly, just kind of get over it and just have those memories that he does have from his family and his parents, and keep those close to his heart. Same thing with Zebo. You know, two guys who are very well liked in the NBA and extremely loved by their teammates. Both those teams, again, they're playing well, and they can kind of get on without them for the meantime. Again, life over basketball every time, and I'm glad they're taking the time to go ahead and handle those things off the court.
Yeah, we've already seen this earlier this season, and we sang praises to the Pelicans organization when Drew Holiday was on indefinite leave of absence because of his personal family matters that were taking place. And quite fortunately, it didn't lead to any unforeseeable passings within the family. There was success from that. But again, you have to give credit to these organizations and to the NBA in their adaptation, their ability to surround the players with the necessary support so they can get through some of the most troubling and toughest times. They're human, just like we are. They are susceptible to the very same things that we are. Just because they're getting paid a ton of money to entertain us and to put a product on the floor doesn't mean that they still have to endure the same things that we endure in everyday life. So once again, our condolences to the Channing Frye family and the Zach Randolph family. We hope to see our boys on the basketball soon, but not soon enough that you have to take care of family business. Awesome show, Shaw. Once again, welcome back to the fray. You know, it's kind of hard trying to talk basketball without you, man, but I'm just happy that you're landside and we getting it in once again.
Absolutely. Back from my vacay, so you can get all my annoying tweets and definitely enjoy this show with my co-host, Kylie, holding it down. It's great to be back. It's just great that the NBA season is in full effect and full swing. And again, the storylines continue to amaze and give us so much to talk about and discuss on a regular basis. And we want to hear from you. So make sure you're joining the discussion. Tune in with us. Hit us up on Twitter, even up on the IG as well too. And make sure you're giving us a rating on iTunes and Stitcher, because we definitely need those to move up in the rankings, because this should be your number one go-to source and your favorite NBA podcast out there. But if we're not, that's okay too. Still tune in.
No, that's not okay. You will tune in, you will subscribe, and you will lock in with Callie and Warren Shaw. As again, we always love talking about the hot button topics of the NBA. So for the baseline, Callie, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys. You know we do. And be sure to check out our upcoming Power 5. We definitely are going to have that ready to go. Who's going to make the top 5 teams so far in the NBA for this upcoming week? We will definitely give you our take on that. So be sure to look out for that. For the baseline, Callie, Warren Shaw. We'll check out you guys next time.